So we talked about on the midweek check-in the Wagner group.
It must be the one, and I'm so.
Perfect. Yes. The soundbite lives on. So we talked about that group, quote unquote, overthrowing the Putin administration in Russia last week, and we use the word administration very lightly. It's the administration that's about as legitimate as the Biden administration, but nonetheless. So the Wagner group is the mercenaries that Putin hires. They're the ones. There's a couple advantages of doing this. They can go in there, and Russia doesn't have to claim responsibility for any war crimes that get committed. If people die, if money gets lost, if illegal stuff goes down, Russia really washes their hands of it. Their body count looks lower whenever they go to war because it's not actual Russian troops dying. This is a private army that Putin's employed. Well, the Wagner group started marching toward Moscow last week, right after the Pentagon came out and said, "Hey, we lost $6 billion in Ukraine. Don't know where it went." I thought that was a little weird. I'm thinking to myself, and we talked about it in the midweek check-in. I'm like, hey, did we bribe these guys? Did we bribe these guys to try to overthrow Russia? Like, we better hope this pays off or we're going to get nuked because this is an act of war. And it is an act of war. So the Wagner group, which is a far-right private army in Russia, far right, not even right. Like, these people are borderline Nazis if you look into some of their connections. The same as the Azov battalion in Ukraine. So they start marching toward him, and everyone on the left was creaming their pants that a Nazi regime was about to take over the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. They were very happy about that. Our friends on the left that constantly warn us of the impending fascist takeover in the United States because Ron DeSantis said you can't read porn to kindergartners were happy that people that may or may not be Nazis, depending on who you poll in the specific group, we're about to seize power of the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. That was idiotic. Before we get any further into what happened, that was an idiotic thing. I can't. You're sitting there, you're cheering on a private army that's committed more war crimes than you can count, and hoping that, listen, Putin's not a good guy, of course not. But this idea that, this Wagner group, it's going to be so much better once we get a psychopathic neo-Nazi drug addict in charge, things are really going to start looking up in Russia when that happens. Let me ask you guys a question. When's the last time in the last 50 years, last 100 years, that they went in and toppled? You'd have to go back to like Hitler and the Nazis, right? That they went in and toppled a regime and a more stable group of people took over. It doesn't happen. Look at recent history all over the Middle East. That's a better example of what would happen. Because, I mean, you got to go back like 80-some years to Nazi Germany. And that was all of the countries in the world helping them rebuild and kind of holding their hand along the way to make sure that you didn't have some crazy dictator rise from the ashes. That wouldn't happen in Russia. Right? That wouldn't happen in Russia. It would be anarchy and it would be chaos until someone took over. So you guys are sitting there rooting for this paramilitary, far-right, neo-fascist group to take over a country, thinking that this is somehow going to make things better for the United States. No. And that's the thing I don't get, is sometimes, unfortunately, the enemy you know is better than the enemy you don't know. And that's the case a lot of the times in the Middle East. You look at, they go in, they topple these dictators, and they kill these guys, and quote-unquote rebels take over, and you have this power vacuum where you've got different warlords committing various atrocities to seize control of the country, and the people that take over, it's typically ISIS or the Taliban or someone like that, and they're worse than the dictator they replaced. Unfortunately, there are just different parts of the world where people respond differently when given freedom. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Now, you look at people like Assad, people like Gaddafi. Those guys are far from perfect. War criminals, dictators, monsters, right? We all agree on that. But we can also agree they're better than ISIS, which is who takes over when you get rid of those guys. Guys like Gaddafi, guys like Assad, the Saudis. None of those people are perfect. They got a lot of issues down there. But, I mean, women can drive and go to school. They don't let you go stone gay people anymore. I'd say those are at least minor improvements. I would say. I don't know. Maybe not the women going to school thing. I think radical Islam doesn't have everything wrong. Maybe they wait till they're like 25. There's got to be some kind of middle ground, so their brains are fully developed and they can't become white liberals. But nonetheless. So this Wagner group, wow, we got trailed off there. This Wagner group was marching toward Russia, or was marching toward Moscow, excuse me. They were already in Russia, to seize control of the country from Putin. And then all of a sudden, it just stopped. They just stopped. They said, hey, we within a day, they said, hey, we negotiated with Russia. We're good to go. Never mind. Bygones be bygones. Cool? All right, cool. And guess where they landed? Just north of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. That's where they veered off when they decided not to attack Moscow. Now, I don't know. Call me a conspiracy theorist here, but it sounds to me like they were never actually going to attack Moscow. There was never actually any threat that Putin would be toppled. You had all these news reports, oh, Putin's on the run. He fled to Belarus. He left the country, blah, 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 blah. None of that happened. None of that happened. So maybe there's something a little bit more nefarious at play. The media has done nothing but paint Putin as this murderous, soulless, merciless dictator for the last couple years, which I don't disagree with. I think he's a bad guy. He's a thug. He's a punk. But do you really think that this murderous, soulless, merciless dictator would have one of his top guys, the leader of this Wagner group, decide to stab him in the back and march a private army toward his house, ready to kill him and take his job? And then just let bygones be bygones? You really think that? You really think Putin, you really think Putin's the type that would have this psychopath in his army marching toward his home, toward him and his family? Right? Ready to kill him, ready to oust him from office? And then the guy goes, hey, we cool on this? All right, let's just forget this happened. Never mind. No, of course, he would kill them. They would hunt them down like animals and they would slaughter them all. Or they just bomb them. But he didn't do that. So that leads me to believe, and we're going to put two and two together here. Remember the $6.2 billion that we talked about earlier on in the episode and last week that went missing from the Pentagon in Ukraine? Well, what if, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but this probably happened. What if this would not be the first time the Biden administration has royally screwed something up? What if that $6.2 billion that went quote-unquote missing from Ukraine didn't go missing? What if they got a little cocky and did what they do in Middle Eastern countries, in not as recently, but they've done it in South American countries, in African countries, in East Asian countries, and paid this Wagner group the $6.2 billion, or at least a portion of it, to go overthrow Putin? What if the CIA, we talked about that last week, what if they bribed them to go in and overthrow Putin? And what if this Wagner group, the leader of it, whose name I won't even try to pronounce, called Putin up and said, hey, you're never going to guess what these idiots just did. Let's put on a show for them. Marched down there, took the money, marched toward Moscow, and then said, never mind, we're good. We worked it out. Truce. It's all good. Cool. And then just so happened to end up when they veered off in Belarus, about 100 miles north of Kiev. What if they did that? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. That wouldn't be the first time that this administration has been absolutely clowned on a global scale. This is the administration that shot $1 million missile at a party balloon. I wouldn't put it past them to screw this up too. Let me know in the comments on Rumble. What do you think? Do you think the Biden administration got scammed? All I'm saying is I think it's a little weird that money went missing, and then a couple days later, we find out this group is marching toward Russia. And then Putin, this horrible, murderous dictator, is just willing to shrug it off, that his right-hand man turned on him. Who cares? I'll give you a mulligan on this one, okay? I'll give you a mulligan on this one. And then they just so happen to end up right above the capital of Ukraine. I think that's a little weird. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to click the link in the description to get the full episode on Rumble. If you prefer to listen along, you could actually get us on Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also go to www.outlawstreamers.com to learn more about not just my show, but tons of other great shows and all the exciting projects they have coming up. Follow my socials at Caleb Isn't Funny on Twitter and Instagram, at Caleb Salvatore Comedy on the Chinese Spy app that is TikTok, and be sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks, and we'll see you every Saturday for brand new episodes of That's Based. Peace.